report that we've been waiting for. What actually happened on January 6th?
In 1954, a traveler stepped off a plane in Tokyo, and something felt wrong right away. He held a passport from a country no one had ever heard of. The airport staff were stunned. There was no trace of this place on any map, no mention of it in any history book. But everything about his documents looked real. For years, people whispered about the man from Taured like it was just a strange rumor. That was, until reports started to surface proving the impossible. Not only was he real, what happened next was far more unsettling than anyone ever imagined. Arrival without a past. It was a hot July day in 1954 when a normal afternoon at Tokyo's Haneda Airport turned into something officials would never forget. The terminal buzzed with businessmen, tourists, and diplomats making their way through customs. But one man caught everyone's attention. He was dressed neatly, carrying a black briefcase, and spoke fluent French and Japanese with a strong European accent. At first, he seemed like just another seasoned traveler used to moving between countries. But what happened after he handed over his passport started a mystery that would leave people questioning everything. The man gave his documents to customs with calm confidence. He was polite and didn't hesitate. His passport looked completely legit, stamped with visas from countries across both Europe and Asia. But when the officer looked at his country of origin, he froze. The passport listed a place called Taured, a country that didn't exist on any map, past or present. At first, officials thought it had to be a mistake. Maybe something got lost in translation, or it was a typo. But the man didn't seem confused at all. In fact, he seemed slightly annoyed that they didn't recognize it. He firmly insisted Taured was real. When they asked for more details, he didn't miss a beat. He pointed at a map, right between France and Spain, where Andorra is. But instead of naming Andorra, he got frustrated. He said Taured had been there for more than 1,000 years. The airport staff tried to stay calm, but the situation quickly started to get weird. Every document the man carried, his driver's license, his business records, even his checkbook, backed up his story. Everything listed Taured as his home. Each item had a symbol no one in customs had seen before. Now worried they were dealing with a clever forgery, or maybe even something more serious, authorities decided to dig deeper. But the man's answers never changed. He spoke clearly about his job, the company he worked for, and the European offices he had recently visited. He even described the banks he worked with. When officials called the Tokyo company he claimed he was visiting, they found it was real. But no one there had heard of him. Then they tried contacting his employer in Taured. That's when things got even stranger, because that company didn't exist at all. It felt like this man had stepped out of a different version of our world, where everything was just slightly off. To rule out any mental health issues, officials brought in a doctor to sit in on the questioning. The evaluation was quick but clear. The man was sane. He was calm, spoke clearly, and actually seemed more confused by what was happening than anyone else. He came across as someone who truly believed every word he said and was growing more unsettled by the minute as nothing lined up with what he remembered. Since they couldn't charge him with a crime but also weren't ready to let him go, the authorities placed him under guard in a hotel room while they tried to figure things out. As they walked him to the hotel, the man from Taured quietly told one of the guards that he'd passed through Tokyo many times before without any problems. He said it softly, almost like it hurt to admit he didn't know what had gone wrong this time. He didn't know, and neither did they, that he'd never get another chance to explain. Because as strange as his arrival had been, what came next tore apart any logical explanation. At first, airport staff still thought they were dealing with some kind of mix-up, maybe a confused traveler or someone using a false identity. They were wrong, very wrong. The real mystery was only beginning. Looking over his passport again, nothing seemed out of place. It was made with the same materials used in European documents, same seals, same stamps, even the expected watermarks. Under UV light, everything checked out. The stamps told a clear story. Entries and exits from France, Spain, Germany, and even 2 earlier visits to Japan, all from the last 5 years. And every single stamp matched what customs officers used during that exact time period. But still, something was impossible. All of it, every stamp, every detail, was tied to a country that didn't exist. Taured wasn't recognized by any other nation. It wasn't in any treaty. No one had ever recorded it in history. Trying to stay grounded in facts, officials brought in forgery experts. If the passport was fake, they figured, it had to be the best one they'd ever seen. But the more experts looked, the less sense it made. The spelling of Taured was unusual, yes, but it was used consistently across all documents. Dates lined up, signatures looked authentic. The more closely they checked, the harder it was to call it a hoax. It looked and felt real in every way. His wallet didn't help clear things up either. It made things worse. Inside were banknotes from France, Spain, and Germany, all still in circulation, all verified as real. His checkbook listed a bank that no one could trace, but everything about it, the ink, the layout, the paper, matched what European banks were using at the time. Even his business card was sharp and professional, written in perfect Japanese. The company it listed was real, but again, no one working there had ever heard of this man. Everything he showed them only added to the confusion. His documents said he was telling the truth, but the facts didn't add up. Officials launched a wider background search. They contacted embassies, checked missing persons lists, and reached out to police departments all over. Nothing. No one knew who he was. His fingerprints turned up no matches. His handwriting was neat, steady. No sign of nervousness. In fact, the only strange thing anyone noted was how calm he stayed through the whole thing. Most people would panic if they were accused of carrying fake documents, but not the man from Taured. He just looked puzzled, like he couldn't understand why anyone would question his story. If anything, it was the world around him that felt strange to him, not the other way around. As the night dragged on, officials argued over what to do. Some thought they should just let him go with a warning and mark it down as an elaborate trick. But others couldn't shake the feeling that this was different. There were too many strange details, too many questions without answers. In the end, they played it safe. They decided to keep him under watch, placing him in a secure hotel near the airport. Guards were assigned to stay outside his door, and plans were made to question him again in the morning. Before he was taken to the hotel, one immigration officer, maybe feeling a little sorry for him, asked if there was anything he needed to be more comfortable. The man just shook his head and gave a small, tired smile. "This will all be sorted out tomorrow," he said, as if he was reassuring them just as much as he was reassuring himself. In that moment, he seemed completely sure of it. That calm confidence was eerie. Almost too calm. But there would be no tomorrow for the man from Taured, not in our world. When officials returned to his room, they would find that reality had twisted again. What had started as a simple passport mystery was about to turn into something far stranger, something no law or logic could explain. The missing man and the vanishing proof. The hotel was nothing fancy, but it was safe and close enough to the airport to keep things contained. 2 guards stood outside the man's room all night, told not to speak to him unless needed. A 3rd officer kept watch over the hallway's only door in or out. There was no balcony, no fire escape, and no windows that could open. Just one solid door with a working lock. He had no way to leave. Inside the room, the man stayed quiet. He accepted a small meal from hotel staff, thanked them politely, and didn't say much else. He seemed tired, maybe worn down, but still completely sure that things would be sorted out by morning. As far as anyone could tell, he got ready for bed and turned in for the night without a problem. But sometime between midnight and dawn, he disappeared. The guards swore they heard nothing. No doors creaked open, no footsteps in the hallway, no sound at all. When immigration officers arrived early that morning to bring him in for more questions, the room was empty. The bed had clearly been used, but there were no signs of a fight, no damage, no forced entry. And just as strange, his belongings were gone, too. The passport, the checkbook, the business cards, the money. All of it. Like it had all vanished into thin air. Panic hit fast. The guards insisted they had stayed at their posts all night. Hotel security confirmed that no one had come in or out through the main entrance. A full search of the hotel turned up nothing. No guests matching his description. No unexplained movements. Officials quickly contacted airport security, issued alerts, and set up roadblocks. Police spread out into the surrounding area. But it was already too late. They searched train stations and bus terminals, but the man from Taured had vanished just as quietly as he had appeared, without a sound, without a trace. All he left behind was a deep, unsettling feeling that something wasn't right. Word of the incident quickly spread through official channels, though it never made it to the public. There were simply too many questions without answers. No one wanted to be the one to explain how a man could disappear from a locked room under armed guard. Internal reports called the case deeply troubling, without precedent. That kind of language said a lot. Even the most experienced investigators were shaken. Quiet meetings were held behind closed doors. Case files were stamped confidential. In time, the quiet decision was made. It was safer to act as though the man had never been there at all. Years later, a few people who'd been involved, speaking only on condition of anonymity, admitted there had been things they couldn't explain. One or two described feeling strange that night, disoriented, as if the world had shifted just slightly off-center. Others mentioned weird little glitches in the hotel, short power flickers, static on radios, lights flickering in the halls. Back then, it was chalked up to nerves or exhaustion. But looking back, those little things didn't feel so harmless anymore. The disappearance of the man from Taured wasn't handled like a regular case. There was no missing persons report, no public statement, no bulletin. Instead, it was swept quietly into a set of classified files, sealed away by people who simply couldn't explain what had happened on their watch. And for years, the story lived only in whispers. A traveler with no past, a passport from nowhere, a vanishing no one could explain. Most people dismissed it as just another bizarre rumor, a weird tale from an airport that had grown over time. But then, years later, new documents came to light, and with them came the one thing no one wanted to face: confirmation. The man from Taured wasn't a legend. He was real. And what happened that night was more disturbing than anyone had imagined. For decades, the story was passed around quietly. A few believed it. Most didn't. It was treated like an airport myth, a cautionary tale about how memories can twist and stories can grow in the telling. But in the background, some people were slowly putting the truth together. Then, leaked documents started appearing. Just a few at first, but enough to make people take notice. They weren't wild theories or rumor. They were real, official records. And they changed everything. According to these newly uncovered files, the first record came from a restricted document inside the Japanese Ministry of Foreign Affairs. The language was dry and technical, but the meaning was clear. It referred to the case as an encounter with unrecognized national entity. The description? A European-looking man arriving at Haneda Airport with fully verifiable documents, except they came from a country that didn't exist. The customs officers had kept detailed notes that showed just how seriously they took the case and how quickly they realized something wasn't right. The man had shown evidence that shouldn't have existed, but the trail didn't stop there. One internal memo, marked Eyes Only, described a meeting between Japanese officials and agents from an unnamed foreign intelligence group. The note was brief but chilling. Anomalous traveler incident confirmed. Subject and materials have ceased to exist within standard physical parameters. Recommend further study. In other words, not only did they acknowledge the man's existence, they admitted they couldn't explain how he had vanished. It wasn't a rumor anymore. It wasn't just a strange story. The event had been quietly filed away in official records that were never meant to be seen. Later leaks revealed even more. University researchers, hand-picked and brought in discreetly, had been asked to study the case. What they found was disturbing. One technical report stated that the Haneda incident might be evidence of a short-lived dimensional disruption, a temporary tear between two versions of reality. They described it as unstable, hard to predict, but with real effects. In simpler terms, something had opened for just a few hours, something that wasn't supposed to. And in that moment, the impossible became real. The man from Taured wasn't a trickster or a confused traveler with fake papers. By every piece of data available, he was exactly who he said he was, a citizen of a world that didn't exist here. And when that fragile opening between realities closed, it took him and everything tied to him back with it. But that wasn't the most disturbing part. Some of the follow-up notes hinted that the event might not have been random at all. Unverified intelligence claimed strange energy spikes had been recorded at Haneda during the man's stay. Fluctuations that didn't match up with equipment errors or known environmental causes. A few scientists warned that what happened might be part of something larger. A pattern? One we didn't yet recognize or understand. So the response was simple. Cover it up. Hard. The public was never informed. The files were sealed. Everyone who knew too much was reassigned, silenced, or urged to move on. But even locked away, the truth refused to stay buried. The man from Taured was real. And what he showed the world, what he was more terrifying than anyone wanted to admit. He wasn't just a traveler from a country that didn't exist. He was living proof that the lines we draw between dreams and reality, between what's real and what's imagined, aren't as solid as we think. Later, in quiet academic circles, a few of the scientists involved shared their final theory. They believed the Haneda incident had left a mark. Small fractures in the structure of reality itself. Not big enough to measure, but definitely there. And if it happened once, they warned, it could happen again. And next time, it might not just be one person who slips through. Cover-ups and theories. In the weeks that followed the disappearance, the Japanese government moved quickly. The incident was erased from every public record. Security files were sealed under national protection laws. Airport documents were scrubbed clean. The staff who had spoken with the man were moved out of their roles, quietly sent to different cities. No press release, no statement, no explanation. No missing person alert was ever issued. As far as the world was concerned, the man from Taured had never been there. But silence doesn't erase suspicion. Whispers about the event kept circulating among airport staff, quiet government workers, and a handful of intelligence officers who had been pulled into the case. Within these small circles, unofficial theories started to take shape. Some were practical, others were deeply unsettling. The most grounded idea suggested the man was part of a complex forgery ring, possibly even a Cold War-era spy operation. In this theory, Taured was just a coded term, and his strange documents were a way to test Japan's border security response. But even the people who backed this idea couldn't explain everything. How had he vanished from a locked, guarded room? Why did multiple pieces of equipment fail during his stay? The more they tried to explain it using logic, the more the pieces refused to fit. Another theory, less comfortable but harder to ignore, suggested something else entirely, that the man had slipped into our world by accident. A traveler from a parallel Earth, one where the layout of countries, the politics, and even history had taken a different path. Supporters of this theory pointed to how precisely his belongings matched real-world standards. His passport used correct formatting. His money was made with the right materials. His ID and business papers followed every rule, yet the places and names on them didn't exist here. It was too perfect to be fake, but too wrong to be real. Some began to suspect Haneda wasn't the only place something like this had happened. Over time, strange reports trickled in, people who spoke in real languages no one could identify. Travelers holding maps that showed countries no one had heard of. Individuals who appeared briefly in airports or train stations, confused and lost, only to vanish again. Most of these stories were dismissed, hoaxes, mistakes, nothing serious. But those who knew about the Haneda case saw something different. They noticed a pattern, faint but growing harder to deny. There were even darker theories, ones only whispered about behind tightly closed doors. Some insiders believed the man hadn't arrived here by mistake at all. They thought he was a scout, part of a larger breach between realities. A warning, a first sign of something bigger. They pointed to the strange electrical interference, the feelings of confusion and unease the guards reported, the complete disappearance with no trace left behind. All of it, they said, suggested reality had briefly been damaged. In that view, the cover-up wasn't just about saving face. It was about protecting the public from something far worse. After all, fear spreads fast, and if people found out that the barrier between worlds could just fall apart without warning, and that no one could stop it, it would cause a panic that no government could contain. Of course, without official confirmation, the story stayed in a strange space between rumor and truth. On paper, the man from Taured was a myth, but the people who had seen the original files, who had handled the documents, knew better. The leaked reports only confirmed what they already suspected. The man from Taured was real. His disappearance wasn't a mix-up, it wasn't a prank, and it wasn't something easily explained away. It was something else, something the world wasn't ready for. Even now, it's said that some of the officials involved still carry the weight of what they saw. A few have left quiet, cryptic notes in private journals and unpublished memoirs, hints of a truth they were never allowed to fully share. There were warnings, tucked between lines of quiet reports and buried notes. Hints that some doors should never be opened, that some mistakes should never be repeated. Because once a boundary has been crossed, once someone from another world steps through, it's no longer about if it can happen again. It's only a matter of when. The man from Taured may have vanished without a trace, but the echoes he left behind never really faded. In university halls, the Haneda case quietly became a reference point, spoken of in closed-door meetings about theoretical physics and dimensional theory. Among conspiracy circles, it became proof that alternate realities weren't just fiction. They were real, unpredictable, and possibly dangerous. And for the rest of us, it became something like a ghost story, a reminder that the world we live in might not be as stable as we think. Scientists who once laughed at ideas like multiverses have slowly begun to shift their tone. What used to be dismissed as wild speculation is now discussed, carefully and with limits. Theories about quantum slips and unstable dimensions have moved from the far edges of thought into serious, if cautious, research. Some point to the so-called Mandela effect, shared memories of things that history says never happened, as a possible sign. They trace the earliest public clue back to Taured, a man who, just for a moment, may have shown us that reality can bend, and sometimes break. And the reports haven't stopped. Here and there, from different parts of the world, new stories still appear. Strange travelers, inaccurate maps, people who vanish after confused appearances. None of them as well documented, none of them as public. But enough to keep the questions alive, enough to keep that quiet fear just beneath the surface. If the story of the man from Taured teaches us anything, it's that certainty is fragile. The borders we trust, whether national, physical, or even existential, may not be as solid as we believe. One moment, a man walks off a plane, confident in the country he calls home. The next, he's trapped in a world where that place has never existed. A living ghost in a reality that denies him. Maybe he was a one-time glitch, a strange, unrepeatable crack in the universe that closed behind him. Or maybe he was the first. A first glimpse into something far bigger, far messier, and far more dangerous than we ever imagined. A reminder that this world is not singular, not fixed, and maybe not safe. Somewhere out there, just beyond our reach, other travelers could be searching, trying to get back to a place that doesn't exist here. So, what do you think really happened to the man from Taured? Was he a lost visitor from another world, or a warning we still haven't understood? If reality slipped once, how would we even know if it's slipping again? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. We'd love to hear your theories. And if you found this story as fascinating as we did, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories that explore the mysteries just beneath the surface of the world we think we know.